Broncos Country, as a tribute to the late and great Demariyus Thomas being inducted today into the Broncos Ring of Fame, we are going to do a State of the Union of the Broncos' current wide receiver room, talk about every single player and what I think is going to ultimately be the way the room shapes out, who's going to be wide receiver one, and who is going to be some of the biggest contributors in this room. Just want to give a really special shout out, man, to Demaryius Thomas. Rest in peace as always. What an unbelievable player, person, part of Broncos Country during some of the best times, man. So such an unbelievable player. And in my opinion, the greatest Broncos wide receiver to ever put on the orange and blue. So a shout out to him. And we're going to do a State of the Union for every single positional group. And I wanted to start today's. It was a perfect time to start it with the wide receiver room. So guys, if you love Denver sports, man, I'd love if you guys would check some of the other videos out. Consider hitting the subscribe button, and let's build a fun community here together, man. So, without further ado, right? A couple videos ago, I said without further ado, like I sounded like I said without further ado. So I want to make sure that I say without further ado. Let's get into the Broncos' current room. So this is kind of what I project for it to look like, and it's always very difficult. And I think it's important to keep in mind, it's always difficult to project the Broncos' room in terms of like who's going to play the X, the Z, the Y, those kinds of things, because Sean Payton's offense is very unique. You typically have a primary X receiver, your wide receiver one. He's going to get a big majority of the targets and the production. Then you've got a guy that's designated to be like a deep threat, take the top over the defense. You've got somebody that, plays in the Z role. Now, Z is typically like a slot receiver or a flanker, right? So that's typically a slot receiver. But in Sean Payton's offense, it's not always just that. These guys do a lot of the blocking as well. So they're kind of lined up more as Y tight ends, like as Y receivers, kind of like tight ends would be. So it's always very tough. But this is kind of the way that I think about it. And I'll say it's a really convoluted room, man. It's very crowded. And it's very confusing as it stands right now. It was kind of like this a little bit last year, and then we started to gain a little bit more clarity. So camp is going to be huge. But right now, without a doubt, wide receiver one, your outside X receiver is going to be Courtland Sutton. Wide receiver two, in terms of the X, is going to be Pat Bryant. Now, that does not mean that he's just going to play strictly on the outside. I view him doing a lot of what little Jordan Humphrey did last year when he played 55% of the snaps. He's going to play a lot of the Z receiver. He's going to play closer to line of scrimmage. Maybe in the slot, and he's going to be asked to block quite a bit. But I ultimately think it's not going to be as much as what they had little Jordan Humphrey doing. I think they're going to split up those duties between Pat Bryant and Devaughn Vele, because I think that they really believe, and I personally believe, Pat Bryant can consistently win on the outside, and he can get open. He can be a true wide receiver two with the upside to one day be your wide receiver one, right? Your other wide receiver three, in terms of the X, your true outside guy is Troy Franklin. Depending on the kind of steps that he takes in his development this upcoming offseason is going to determine a lot of what it is that he does. But I feel like they view him as someone that, if needed, can step in and be the outside receiver. But he's going to be utilized mainly as someone that's taking the top off the defense. Is he going to be a deep threat all the time and get the ball deep? Not necessarily, but it's going to open up a lot of those short to intermediate routes for Bo Nix. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. I don't think they want him running across the middle, those drag routes, those deep posts, as much as he was doing last year. So, it's going to be very, very interesting. And this is going to be one intriguing room to follow during camp. I will tell you that. I'm super excited for it. Now, the wide receiver one that I have right now as your Z, as your slot or your flanker, as we had mentioned before, is going to be Vele. I think Devaughn Vele is somebody that, as a big slot receiver, really fits the mold well. He's the reason that Tim Patrick didn't ultimately make the team last year. We can talk a lot about that, but very similar to how it was a crowded room and somebody had to go, I view the room being very similar this year, because you've got to see what you have in a lot of these players. Who's going to be able to take the reins? What are you going to do with the Courtland Sutton contract? There's so many questions, and we're going to go through all that. But I like Devaughn Vele a lot as your big slot. He's someone that's pretty sure-handed. He runs decent routes. He can create some separation across the middle. I feel like he's got really good ability to block for you. So I like him a lot as the slot receiver. And then Marvin Mims as well. Now, Marvin Mims, in an ideal world, he would be just your primary slot all the time because of his quickness and his speed and his versatility and what he can do yards after the catch. So again, another player that we have to, see what ends up happening with his overall development. And you know how I feel about my guy Marvin, man. I love me some Marvin Mims. You gotta find ways to get the ball into his hands. If he can become better as a pure receiver, he's gonna be the most dangerous weapon on this offense. Point blank, period, end of story. But Marvin Mims, yeah, he'll play in the slot a little bit. He's gonna get a lot of those behind the line of scrimmage catches, the wide receiver screens. He'll take some carries out of the backfield. He'll kind of do it all. I expect for that. You can also send him deep. There's so much that you can do with him. So what kind of role does he play on this offense is going to be very much determined by the development and what he ultimately looks like going into year 3. You saw that year 1 to year 2 leap, right? It took a few weeks last year, but we saw it. And then to really round out the depth of the room, I mean, you got A.T. Perry, right? You got Trent Sherfield and company, right? So just a bunch of other guys. We got some, Jawan Newton, Courtney Jackson, some of the undrafted guys. You still got Michael Bandy figuring out a way around. I think this is going to be a practice squad that probably has 2 or 3 wide receivers. But when you look at it, right, you got Sutton, Bryant, Franklin, Vele, Mims. That's 5. A.T. Perry is 6. Trent Sherfield is 7. All right. Are 7 wide receivers going to make the 53 this year? I don't know. I don't think so. And that's going to be where a lot of this gets really convoluted in a way, right? So I view Trent Sherfield as someone that's definitely going to make the team in terms of the depth guys, just because he is a special teams ace, and that is what we brought him for. And then the rest of the guys, I don't see a situation where any of those guys won't make it, which is why the Courtland Sutton contract situation is so important. And it's going to be, I think it's going to shape the entire offense and the entire room once we have a little bit of clarity there. He's obviously seeking another deal. Now, there's two things that I see to this. This is kind of my opinion on Courtland, right? I like the player. Obviously, he's been with us through the bad times and the good times. I think he's really solid. I don't think he deserves any more money than what he's gotten, to be frank. And I'm always someone that's like, get the players more money. I don't like the fact that the Broncos last year gave him an incentive-laden deal with the promise that they would get a deal done this year if he ends up getting them. I just think you're almost backing yourself up into a corner. That's kind of what it is that they did. That being the case, I think that they should come up with some sort of a solution for him. But I would be just fine with playing hardball with Courtland Sutton and saying, listen, man, you're getting $20 million this year, right? If you make this team. So we could just guarantee you the 20. Otherwise, if we cut him or traded him, we would still pay him out $13 million. We would save $7 million in cap. So he's getting $13.2 million regardless. If he makes this team and he plays, he's getting $20 million. $20 million is absolutely right in line with the range that he deserves. There's no doubt about it. And to be able to add more money and kick the can down the road and have him here for this year and potentially, maybe next year or 2 years is just bringing more confusion to this wide receiver room, right? I think he's a lower tier wide receiver 1. I think he's an elite wide receiver 2 on an offense. But as a wide receiver 1, he's not all that good. I think Broncos Country right now is really forgetting that the standard has been so low with our offense for so many years that we just look at like 1,000 yards receiving in back-to-back seasons and we go crazy. No name wide receivers, guys that you barely hear about, do that all the time. And I just feel like the Broncos would be better served consistently looking at ways to upgrade there rather than, have to almost have him have all the leverage kind of like he does, right? Because he was really the only consistent weapon for Bo Nix last year. I think the drafting of Pat Bryant in the addition is going to be huge. If he looks amazing in OTAs and in training camp, I would not be surprised one bit if we were to move on from Courtland Sutton. And I know some people might freak out about that, but I would not worry about it one bit. And to be honest with you, I could definitely get on board with that. Not because I'm trying to be a Courtland Sutton hater by any means, but because you guys have to always think about how are you going to properly manage the roster. If you believe in Bo Nix, which I think consensus of Broncos Country very much does, and if you believe in Sean Payton, again, which I think a majority of Broncos Country does, then there's no reason that you should think this offense is contingent on if Courtland Sutton is on this team or if he's not, or if he's playing really well or if he's not. I truly believe that if you were to take an approach of we're going to spread the ball around a little bit more and we're going to get other guys involved, and maybe if Pat Bryant or Franklin takes a huge leap, or even Vele just continues his growth, they're going to be able to step in and at least produce as much as Sutton. But the positive there is that those guys have a ceiling. That there's more potential for them to reach. With Courtland Sutton, you can't say that. I feel like he's already hit his ceiling. And right now he's going to be a descending player. I don't like to say depreciating asset because that just makes him sound like their property is kind of messed up. But when you look at it from a business sense, that's kind of what it is. So if it was up to me, in an ideal world, we roll with Sutton this year. We don't do anything different to his deal. He's going to get the $20 million, and we see how the season plays out. If other guys are stepping up and you're confident in the rest of the guys, the Pat Bryants, the Troy Franklins, the Mims, the Veles of the world, then you can move Courtland Sutton, during the trade deadline for a team that might be really desperate for him, for a player like him. And then it'll be good. We need to learn our lesson from the mistake that we made last year by just cutting Tim Patrick, basically for Lil Jordan Humphrey, right? And obviously I know we had Josh Reynolds early in the season too, and then Devaughn Vele really started to pop off in camp. So we said, hey, listen, somebody's got to go in this room. It is way too crowded. They ended up parting ways with, Tim Patrick instead of Courtland. I truly believe it was probably because of the two injuries. Whereas if they just rolled with him for a couple, for at least a few weeks, and maybe another team would have pounced and, traded for him. But also, we could have used Tim Patrick last year. We could have used his just solid ability to get open and catch the ball. I mean, he did some decent things for Detroit last year as, wide receiver 5 or whatever it was. So I think we're going to learn our lesson this year and say, you know what? I think we've been perfectly fair with Sutton. We paid him before he ends up tearing his ACL. We stuck with him. There was a lot of years where we could have gotten out of the contract and saved quite a bit of money. We didn't. We kept him on the team. We gave him some raises really in back-to-back seasons. Last year he had a lot of incentives. Kudos to him, he got it, but we still gave him that opportunity. And so I think it's good, and he's going to end up playing. And if he plays this year under the $20 million without getting any more money, he's going to get every single penny of the contract that we initially gave to him and some. So I think it's perfectly fair. You look at the other guys in the league making $25, $30 million a year, you can make the argument that those guys are absolutely better. They're more productive players, whether it's because they're just better, or they're younger and they're better, or they're right at the same level, but they have a lot more room for growth. That's kind of where I'm at. So we're going to have to see where that goes as the rest of the offseason unfolds. But the real big stories here, man, the guys that I'm looking forward to seeing the most, obviously aside from Pat Bryant, I cannot wait. I've been high on him since before the draft. I'm really, really, really intrigued by seeing how Troy Franklin looks after, a full year of playing, a full off season. I would hope that he gets a little bit of weight added to him, gets a little bit crisper in his routes running, because he's got a lot of potential from an athletic standpoint, from the speed, obviously, a very productive player at Oregon in college, a little bit younger last year. And I think if he can take a big step, that's going to be huge for this team overall. I expect for Devaughn Vele, I really see so many similarities between Devaughn Vele and Tim Patrick. Just solid guys that, kind of understand the players that they are. They're able to get open across the middle, do all the dirty work, and just really do whatever's asked for them. That's why I like Devaughn Vele on this team. He can play outside. He can play in the slot. He can block. You can move him around in a lot of different areas. He's really the only guy that gives you that kind of versatility besides what I think Pat Bryant's going to be able to do. And then obviously, man, Marvin Mims. At this point, it's just like, I just want to see them get him as many opportunities as possible. But if he continues to get better as a pure receiver, it's going to be fun. Who's going to be gone, guys? I don't think the Broncos are going to roll with 7 wide receivers on their 53. I think they're going to have 2 to 4 on their practice squad. But when you start to do the numbers, it gets a little bit convoluted, right? It gets a little bit crowded. A.T. Perry, a lot of people in Broncos country are pretty excited about him. I mean, listen, whatever your thoughts are on him or what you think he can be, you're definitely going to be interested in seeing what can he do. He's got a lot of the tools that you kind of covet. Sherfield, we know, is going to make the team because of his special teams ability. We're not going to get rid of Mims, are we? We're not going to get rid of Vele. Franklin is, maybe the most likely. Like if we get blown away by a trade offer and a team wants to, take a chance on him, maybe. But I don't see that happening. Pat Bryant's not going anywhere. So the only real potential guy that I think can get traded, if you wanted to keep all these guys listed, except for the and co guys, it's going to be Courtland Sutton. It's going to be interesting. Can you sneak A.T. Perry through the practice squad? Maybe you can, but maybe another team's like, man, I want to take a look at him, or maybe he doesn't elect. Maybe he'd rather go to another team's practice squad, right? So you can't just rely on that. So it's going to be an interesting room, man. And I think it's going to be all about competition. And it's not about what this front office and Sean Payton say. It's about what they do, right? So what they do or don't do with Courtland Sutton is going to be big. But what I'll say is they drafted a wide receiver with a premium pick, and they brought in quite a bit of undrafted free agents as well. A lot more than I was expecting in what is already a very, very crowded room. So it's going to be very interesting to see, man. This is kind of my consensus and my overall thoughts on this. I think it's a crowded room, but it's a very deep room in a way, right? And what I mean by deep is that, yes, you can see that there's a lot of guys that you feel like have a lot of potential, but you don't really know. You haven't seen them. And sometimes you have to bet on potential when it comes to these guys, right? If you trust your scouting, you trust your evaluation, you understand, you got a good idea of what you feel like guys can and cannot do, then you've got to be able to unlock that and see what it is that you got. So I think it's like I said, a very deep room, because trying to pick, if I was to tell you, all right, 6 receivers are going to make the team, which 6 are you going to choose? Is it just going to be, the 5 listed plus Sherfield, and then you move on with it? It certainly could be, but I don't think it's going to be that straightforward of a decision. Another thing is, I don't think that there's a true wide receiver one. Now, here's what I mean by that. If Courtland Sutton is ultimately on this team, he will be technically the wide receiver one for the Broncos, meaning he's going to play the most snaps. He's going to be the starter every game. He's going to get the most amount of targets. He's going to probably end up with the most receptions. So he's a actual wide receiver one. But when you look at the true elite wide receiver ones in the NFL, that they do not reside on this roster as it currently stands. And I think that the offseason and training camp will be absolutely massive for so many of these guys. It's going to be really fun to watch, and probably the battle that I'm looking forward to the most of any. Even the running back room, even the inside linebacker room, wide receiver is going to be very big, because it's like, who are going to be these weapons for Bo Nix? I'm just happy. I will say I'm happy that we don't have to talk about little Jordan Humphrey no more. I am. I'm happy about that. And what's going to happen? Can 1 to 2 of these guys ultimately be traded? I think it's possible. It wouldn't even surprise me if maybe they moved on from someone like Marvin Mims. And it would break my heart, because I love me some Marvin. But it wouldn't surprise me, because if another team is like, man, we love what he can do, let's say like the 49ers, and they're wanting to give us a pretty decent draft pick for him, I mean, you at least got to listen to it and hear it out and see what it is that you could do, because you need to be able to have as well-rounded as a roster as possible. And if you have a positional group that's crowded, typically changes are always made. That's just how it works. I don't think that's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that was the case. So overall, I love our wide receiver room. I really do. I'm very excited to see what comes of this, specifically with Pat Bryant, right? Can Pat Bryant show that he can be a high-level wide receiver in the NFL? Not just, a starter for the Broncos, but wide receiver one, somebody that takes over the Courtland Sutton role and really can ultimately produce. We'll see. I think that their potential is certainly there. I'd love to know, man, what you guys think down below in the comments about this wide receiver room. Again, rest in peace to Demariyus Thomas. I love that the Broncos are honoring him to go into the Ring of Fame here in Denver. So long live DT, man. Go Broncos. Y'all take it easy. And until the next video, peace.